Today is Monday, January 5th. We'll tell you all about the U.S. military raid that captured Venezuela's leader, what the Trump administration now wants from the country, and which other countries are now being warned they could be next. Also, who was allegedly behind a failed New Year's Eve terror plot on the East Coast, and why President Trump called off his plans for the National Guard. Plus, people are increasingly betting on major world events. Controversy is already swirling over Mamdani's first acts as New York City mayor. And the first awards show of the year could give us clues as to who will sweep them all. Those stories and even more news to know coming up. Welcome to The Newsworthy, all the day's news in less than 15 minutes. I'm Erica Mandy. Thanks so much for being here. Let's do this. Today, Venezuela's captured leader will appear in an American courtroom as the U.S. begins to oversee the future of his country. As you likely heard, the U.S. military carried out a raid over the weekend that seized Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife. It was one of the most significant U.S. interventions in Latin America in decades. It reportedly involved months of planning and involved the most elite army units with support from the Marines, Air Force, and Navy. The raid happened just before midnight in the capital of Venezuela. The U.S. struck military targets and went to Maduro's safe house that's been described as a fortress. Soon after, pictures and video came out of the Venezuelan leader handcuffed in U.S. custody. More than 80 people were killed in this operation. The U.S. says there were no Americans who died, but some service members were hurt. Remember, the U.S. accuses Maduro and other Venezuelan leaders of using their positions in government to help gangs bring drugs into the U.S., and authorities say it's been happening for more than 2 decades. Now, Maduro is facing charges in the U.S., including narco-terrorism conspiracy. His wife faces criminal charges like conspiracy to import cocaine. So what's happening now in Venezuela? Well, with Maduro out, Venezuelan armed forces are actively patrolling the streets of their country, and many people who live there are hunkered down, unsure of what's going to happen next. President Trump has said the U.S. will run the country, though yesterday Secretary of State Marco Rubio explained the U.S. is really running the direction of the country. The Trump administration says American forces are not on the ground there and insists the U.S. and Venezuela are not at war. At this point, Maduro's vice president has taken over with the okay from the country's top court. The Trump administration says even though it does not consider her a legitimate leader, it will work with her to clamp down on drug trafficking and overhaul Venezuela's oil industry. But she has said she's not willing to work with the U.S. Well, President Trump now says he could launch a second military strike on Venezuela if the administration does not cooperate with his efforts to fix the country. The Trump administration's action against Venezuela is not just about drug trafficking, but also oil. The U.S. says it now has a quarantine on Venezuelan oil, and keep in mind the country's economy depends on their oil. In fact, Venezuela has the world's largest known oil reserves. President Trump says the country has stolen U.S. oil because former President Hugo Chavez forcefully renegotiated contracts with American oil companies, driving many of them out. Now Trump says those American companies need total access to the country's reserves and that they need to be compensated for what they lost out on. By the way, President Trump says there were even more factors that led to Maduro's capture besides drugs and oil, like immigration. Because Venezuela has seen an economic collapse and other issues, there has been a mass exodus, triggering a flood of new immigrants looking to come to the U.S. While President Trump characterizes the raid and capture of Maduro as a major success, internationally, the response has been mixed. China and other adversaries have called the attack a clear violation of international law. Some allies, like European nations, have called for de-escalation. Though some point out they also have not been recognizing Maduro's presidency since the last election. It's believed to have been rigged. So they've called the development good news for Venezuelans who have been living under a dictatorship. Reaction is also mixed here in the U.S. Top Democrats are calling it illegal under international law, and many lawmakers have said Congress was not notified ahead of the attack. Some Democrats and Republicans are criticizing the Trump administration for that. But other Republicans have praised President Trump's action, framing it as an example of strong, decisive leadership meant to help national security. This week, they're expected to vote on whether to formally authorize the military's actions. Even though the raid has already happened, it would force the White House to get approval from Congress for any future attacks in Venezuela. Today, the UN Security Council also plans to meet to discuss this attack. And meanwhile, President Trump seems to be threatening even more countries. He says Colombia and Mexico could also face military action if they don't stem the flow of illegal drugs into the U.S. He also renewed his calls for an American takeover of Greenland. And Secretary Rubio has said Cuba is in a lot of trouble, accusing the Cuban regime of propping up Maduro. So To be continued. People celebrating the new year at a luxury ski resort in the Swiss Alps quickly found themselves confronting a tragedy. A devastating fire tore through the resort's crowded bar, killing at least 40 people and leaving nearly 120 others hurt, many with extreme burns. Authorities say they're still piecing together exactly how this fire started and why it spread so fast. But they believe it was likely caused by sparklers on champagne bottles that came too close to the ceiling. Prosecutors say they're now investigating the bar managers for possible negligence. Hundreds of people in Switzerland marched in silence yesterday to honor those who were killed or hurt. There will be a national day of mourning later this week. Well, the FBI says it was able to prevent a terror attack reportedly being planned for New Year's Eve in North Carolina. An 18-year-old Burger King worker was arrested. Authorities say he planned to target people at either a Burger King or a grocery store with knives and hammers. They say he was inspired by ISIS and had been planning for a year to attack Christians, Jews, and LGBTQ people. The FBI actually first opened an investigation into the suspect 4 years ago when he was just 14. He ended up being referred for psychological care. This time, he could end up spending up to 20 years in prison. National Guard troops have been told there are no more plans to send them into Chicago, Los Angeles, and Portland. Of course, this comes after months of legal challenges pitting President Trump, who wanted them to help crack down on crime and immigration, against local leaders who said they weren't needed. And remember, a couple of weeks ago, the U.S. Supreme Court actually told Trump he could not send troops into Chicago, and there were questions about how that might impact other cities. But according to President Trump, it was not the legal challenges that made him change plans. As he explained, it was actually that crime in those cities have already gone down. The president credited his administration, saying Chicago, Los Angeles, and Portland would all be gone if he had not intervened. And he says if crime goes up again, he'll intervene again, perhaps in another way. Though, to be clear, National Guard troops were never allowed to start their mission in Portland, and they had already been scaled back in Los Angeles and Chicago. Troops are still deployed in Washington, D.C., New Orleans, and Memphis. More news is still ahead, but first, a quick thanks to our sponsor, Quince. I'm starting the year with a closet review and reorganization. So if you, like me, are looking for at least a little wardrobe refresh, Quince has you covered with everything you need for layering, mixing, and filling any gaps you have in your closet. For me, I just got one of their cashmere sweaters, and it's a staple for sure. I've already worn it so many times. It's super soft. I love the green color I got, and it lays just right. And of course, I packed it in my Quince carry-on bag for a quick trip I just took over the holiday break because I love the luggage from Quince as well, and I'll be using it throughout 2026. Plus, like everything from Quince, each item is made with premium materials in ethical, trusted factories, then priced far below what other luxury brands charge. Refresh your wardrobe with Quince. Don't wait. Go to quince.com/newsworthy for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada, too. That's QUINCE.com/newsworthy to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/newsworthy. Now, back to the news. The stock market as a whole ended up rising throughout 2025. That means there have now been 3 straight years of double-digit gains, even though this year analysts had been worried about things like tariffs, a government shutdown, and a potential AI bubble. Now, they say things are looking up for the stock market because of a few trends, like corporate earnings that have been mostly resilient, a series of interest rate cuts, and enthusiasm for AI that doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Now that we're in 2026, many analysts and investors expect yet another year of growth. Others, though, say there's not enough good stuff to keep up this kind of pace. Stay tuned. The new leader of America's most populated city carried out his first acts as mayor. And already, they've sparked controversy. New York City's new mayor, Zohran Mamdani, decided to undo most orders his predecessor, Eric Adams, issued after being indicted. And that's quite a few, since Adams was charged with corruption back in September of 2024. They include an order that expanded the definition of anti-Semitism, and another that kept city employees and agencies from boycotting or divesting from Israel. Well, that sparked backlash from some Jewish leaders who now accuse Mamdani of fueling anti-Semitism, especially since the mayor has been critical of the Israeli government before. But Mamdani insists he's not anti-Semitic, and he's promised to make protecting Jewish New Yorkers a focus of his administration. Separately, Mamdani signed 3 executive orders in an effort to speed up new housing development and better protect tenants' rights. The original viral cupcake shop is shutting down. Sprinkles closed all stores and cupcake vending machines for good after 20 years in business in states around the country. The company did not give much of a reason for the sudden closure, just cited financial conditions due to unforeseen business circumstances. Well, that's a far cry from 2005 when the stores first opened. Celebrities like Barbra Streisand, Drew Barrymore, and Oprah Winfrey quickly embraced them. And pretty soon, there were long lines that spanned several city blocks. Other famous bake shops sprang up from Sprinkles' success. Some of those other ones are still going strong today. Hollywood's biggest stars got together twice this weekend to kickstart awards season. And already there are some frontrunners. At last night's Critics' Choice Awards, one battle after another took home Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Adapted Screenplay. Best Actor went to Timothée Chalamet for Marty Supreme, and Jessie Buckley won Best Actress for Hamnet. The Palm Springs Film Awards also happened over the weekend. The awards themselves aren't usually considered a reflection of what's to come, but many Oscar voters tend to go to this one, so it's a chance for everyone in the movie-making industry to pitch themselves as worthy of an Academy Award. One of the biggest endorsements came when Jane Fonda presented an award of the people behind Hamnet, calling it the perfect film. Another one of the night's big moments came when actress Laura Dern spoke about her Jay Kelly co-star Adam Sandler, saying he should be more appreciated for his dramatic work as well as his comedy. Then his acceptance speech was much like a short stand-up routine. There was also Leonardo DiCaprio, who, like others, spoke virtually about the importance of creating not just content, but cinema. The next big award show on this year's calendar is the Golden Globes, coming up on Sunday. That's it for the main news, so now it's time for Money Monday, when we talk about one interesting money-related news story. But first, I want to talk about our sponsor. As I'm working on my closet review and refresh, Skims is one of those brands that is my go-to for so many of my everyday essentials, from short and long sleeve tees to bras and underwear to my pajamas. If you've been listening for a while, you know I've been talking about them for a long time now. I reach for the tees time and time again for their form-fitting silhouette that flatters my waist and their super soft material. They feel so great on, and I can wear them on their own or use them for layering. They're also versatile for a super casual look or a dressier night out, depending on what I pair them with. In fact, everything I've ever gotten from Skims is such a great material. I can feel the softness and the quality right away. Skims lives up to the hype, so shop my favorite bras, underwear, tees, pajamas, and more at skims.com. After you place your order, be sure to let them know we sent you, select podcast in the survey, and be sure to select our show, The Newsworthy, in the drop-down menu that follows. Now, back to Money Monday. Prediction markets are booming, with millions of dollars being bet not just on sports, but also world events. In fact, over the weekend, bettors earned huge profits over the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. But some say the timing of it all is suspicious. The market for whether or not Maduro would be out of power climbed just before 10 p.m. on Friday, before President Trump announced it on Saturday morning. A newly created account actually invested $30,000 on it on Friday. And after Maduro went into custody, that same investor netted more than $400,000. So some critics believe there may have been some unfair insider bets placed, though it also could have been a good guess. Either way, at least one congressman says he plans to introduce a bill to limit elected officials and other political figures from engaging in these kinds of bets. Thank you so much for listening today and continuing to make us part of your daily routine this new year. And a special thank you to all of our new insiders over the last month, including Matt from Indiana, Kaylee from California, and many more. Reply to your insiders' welcome email if you'd also like a shout out, and we'll be back with even more news to know tomorrow. Thanks again for listening, and have a great day.